All right, well, greetings everyone, and welcome to the next session of the IlliniCloud Webinar Series featuring Nebraska's Special Education System, SRS. Joining us today, well, first off, my name is Pannu. I'm the Business and Operations Lead for IlliniCloud and kind of the moderator for today's session. Joining us today, we have a collection of folks from Nebraska, including Wade Fruhling, who's the Director of the Student Record System at Educational Services Unit 1. And I believe Stuart Clark is going to give us some introductions, and we have other folks on as well, including David Ludwig and Scott Isaacson. As with all webinar sessions, this is intended to be interactive. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat window, and we'll either address them in stride or kind of queue them up for the end, depending on where we are in the presentation. And as a general kind of administrative reminder, these webinars are recorded and they're posted to the IlliniCloud YouTube channel along with other previous webinars. So feel free to go out to YouTube, type in IlliniCloud, you'll find the channel, and you'll see all the presentations there. With that, Wade, Stuart, I'll turn it over to you guys to, you're already sharing your screen, so to introduce yourself and get started.
All right, well, this is Stuart Clark. I'm the Special Ed Director at ESU1 Cooperative in Northeast Nebraska. Just to give you a little background, SRS started about 15 years ago as a collaborative effort between the Nebraska Department of Education and the ESUs to have one system across the state that would easily allow districts to be in compliance with federal changes, and also to ensure that we would have a smooth and easy way to transition students and their files from district to district. So it's evolved over time. It started with a few districts as pilots, and then it's grown now to the point where we have all districts in the state except for 4 are using SRS as their student or special education record system. Several years ago, it transitioned from being sort of run by ESU1 to being run by the Educational Service Unit Coordinating Council and Dave Ludwig, but Wade's been the director of the project for about 10 years.
12 years.
12 years. Yeah. So I think I'll turn it over to him to talk about what SRS is.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my goal today is just going to give you a general overview of the site. There's actually a lot to show you and probably very little time to do it, so I will move rather quickly, but I want to give you a good feel of everything that the site offers, and leave plenty of time for questions as well. So just to speed things up, I've already logged into the site. Once users log into SRS, they get taken to a welcome screen. Not a whole lot to tell you on this, other than we just have, if you see up here, we have some announcements that we put out to our users. Like this morning, we did some routine maintenance. We let our users know that the site was down. So users can come to this, see what's new and what's going on in SRS. And then also from here, you can kind of see just the general overall navigation of the site. So right now we're on what's called a home tab. That's where you first log in. And then with each tab, we have some options along the blue bar, depending on what tab you're on. We also have a students tab, which probably 95% of what people do on SRS happens in there. So that's probably 95% of what I'll be showing you today will be on the students tab. But just real briefly, we also have a personnel tab. One thing on SRS we allow our users to do is look up other SRS users. So if you're working with a student over at Boys Town, in Omaha, you can look up their contact information, email address, that sort of thing. And we also use this to allow people to apply for new privileges, is what now, it's a term. Privileges is what we call just different levels of access on our site, and that's, I guess, one of the things I wanted to show you. I've got this screen open here. So one of the things we try to do on SRS, maybe I make this a little bit bigger, is we want to keep confidentiality between, from one student to the next. We want their information to be visible by only the people who need it, not necessarily everybody in the school building. So to achieve that, we've set up different levels of access that users can apply for when they create their SRS accounts based on what their needs are. So just real briefly, I'll describe those. Probably our highest level account is what we would call district manager. And in our system here, we have every school district has one assigned district manager. That person has access to every student record, every personnel record on the site. They can access a lot of the the district profile pages where there's optional forms that we offer that they can turn on or turn off those optional features. They can upload their logo to the forms. Various settings that are available. The district manager can access that. Another thing too, we have one single district manager per district, but we also allow multiple people, which we call associate district managers, to also have a very same level of access to. So you can have really as many as associate district managers as you want, but there'll be one district manager, and all of them will basically have the same level of access where you can see all the students, all the records. And it's just kind of an overall access to the entire district's information. Next level down, on each school building, we have one school manager. And the school manager has access to all the students and personnel records in that particular school building. They can access the school profile page, which, like the district profile page, has a couple features you can turn on and off, and allows them to put in commonly used dates that everybody in that school will use. School managers also handle the majority of student transfers. Kind of like what Stuart said, one of the nice things about SRS, at least in the state of Nebraska, is that we have all but 4 of our districts are on SRS. So that means we're all using a standardized type of, standardized form, standardized process. And if one student transfers from one Nebraska district to another, we can transfer those files very quickly and easily just through, a couple clicks. And the school managers will also handle privilege requests. So if I wanted to work with a student in my school building, those requests get sent to the school managers who ought to know who belongs and does not belong in a school, and they will activate those account requests. The next level down is probably our most common level of access, and that's what we call case manager. On SRS, if you're somebody just in charge of overseeing the students' IEP forms getting created and what have you, typically you'll be assigned the case manager level access. And if you have that level of privilege, you do not have access to every student in the district. You only have access to the students that you are assigned to. And when you're assigned to a student, then you get access to anything that needs to be done for that student. So you can create any forms. You can actually, and I'll show you this when we get into it, but you can set up student teams, which shares access to that student's information to other people who are working with that student. And basically the case manager is the point person for any given student on the site. Then as we scroll down, the next step below that, we have, actually these are really two privilege levels that we have, but I'm going to combine them just for the sake of simplicity. But that's school staff and specialist. Those are roles people like physical therapists, occupational therapists, even regular ed teachers often take these roles. And if you have this level of access, you get your access through students through the case manager via the student team, which I will show you as we get into this demonstration. But so they get their access through the case manager via student team. And then we also have a separate privilege level altogether for folks who work in, I don't know if it's universally, everybody calls them Part C, but in Nebraska, our early intervention, we call them Part C students, but birth through 3 years old. And so early intervention case managers, service coordinators will have access to our early intervention forms, our IFSP form, for instance, and all the notices and other forms that go along with that. So it gives you a sense of how we have access to the students. So when these different levels, different personnel log into the site, they may see a slightly different view. For instance, if I'm a district manager, I'll see this districts tab up here, which allows me to access some of those district profile features I was talking about. If I'm a school manager, I'll see this schools tab. And then if I'm just a case manager, I will not see a schools and districts tab, nor will I see the reports tab, but I will see the home, student, and personnel. So everybody has a little bit different view based on what their role is. Just to speed things up, I'll kind of just leave it like that for now. Also, just point this out, we also have a help tab, which has a whole bunch of documentation that people can download. And one of the things we've been doing that's semi-new to SRS is we've been putting even videos on the site itself. So if we have a new feature that comes out, we'll put a little tutorial video on there that people can look at and learn what that new feature is about and kind of get a little quick tutorial on it. So I just switched to the Students tab. And like I said, this is probably where 90% of the work on SRS takes place, is under the Students tab. And I'm logged in. I created just a kind of a fake account, which I'm calling the IlliniCloud District Manager account. I actually set up a series of sample accounts and our own little Illinois sample district that I can share with you folks. And so, at your leisure, you can log in, test the site out a little bit. You can even create forms if you want. You can, try all the features that we're talking about. And like I said, I'll be here available for questions too, and I'll make sure my contact information gets sent out as well. But just, basically speaking, when we get to the Students tab, I'll just show you some of the basic features. If I log in as a case manager, by default, my students that I have access to will appear down below at the bottom of the screen here. And now I've only set up 3 students at this point, so there's not a whole lot of searching that needs to be done. But if you are somebody who's maybe the district manager of a given district, we have a whole bunch of different search criteria that you can use to kind of find information that you want. For instance, you could search by case manager's last name. So if I wanted to see who a given case manager is working with in a given school or in my district, I could put in that person's case manager's last name, and I'll see all the students that they have access to. You can search by an individual school. You can search by the whole district. Are they public school students? Yes or no. You can search by grade levels, ethnic groups, even by service. So if I just said, show me all the kids that are, have occupational therapy as their service, you can do that as well. So we have a wide variety of ways to search for students. Probably the most common way we do is just with first and last name, but we do have those other features available. A couple other things too, when we print out whatever search we've been trying to produce, we have a couple options to view that data. By default, it'll just show up down here. But if I wanted to print out a list, we have this section here. If I click Print Results, a little pop-up screen will open up, and it'll have really a more printer-friendly looking view of the data that I produced appear. And it actually brings up the little print interface on my computer, where all I have to do is hit print, and it'll send it to the printer so I can print that list off. And we also have an option here that says export results to CSV, or a comma-separated values file. It's just a file that Microsoft Excel generally knows how to open up. So it's basically exporting to Excel. But if I click that, export results to Excel, it'll download that data, and then it'll put it into an Excel sheet form. And then from there, you can do whatever Excel is designed to do with it. So you can do some advanced sorting, make charts out of it, that sort of thing like that. When we produce our data, we have different data formats that you can use as well. So for instance, by default, we give you the school list, which tells you very basic information on what district and what school that student's attending. Some of the other options we have are like phone book. Well, I won't show you them all, but that kind of tells you who's the case manager, gives you contact information on the students. Probably the most popular one, at least for us, is an Mbt and Iep report. When I run my student search with the Mbt Iep report, now mind you, these students I just created don't have a lot of forms just yet. I've only created forms for one. But what it'll do is it goes through every student that you have access to and identifies when their last IEP and last MDT and actually even IFSP forms were created, and then tells you when the next one will be due. So if it found an IEP, it'll add 364 days to the date of conference and tell you when the next one's due. MDT is basically 2 years, 364 days to tell you when the next one's due. And that's just something our users use to just keep track and make sure that they don't miss any deadlines, that sort of thing. Another option we have too on the search page, putting criteria, is that over on this left bar we have kind of a system we created up to do batch processing. So the way this works is if I put in, I do a search for students, and maybe I want to have a certain grouping of students. So I'll just check all of these students here like so. And once I'm checking these little check boxes, when I come over to the group action section, it gives me a couple options that I can do to apply to all of those students that I've selected. So for instance, one of the tasks that's maybe a little more difficult, for, just more time consuming for our users, is printing out progress reports. So maybe they have 25 students on their caseload. They want to print out 25 progress reports. Rather than going to each student and finding that form and printing them individually, we can click this little option here that says print, and then it'll bring up a couple options. I'd print the most recent form, the most recent draft form, most recent finalized form, and I'll get into draft and finalize as we get into it. But then you can pretty much print all the forms for those students and combines them into one PDF that you can print one time as opposed to 25 separate forms. So you have things like that. There's group actions allow you to transfer groups of students from one district to another. You can assign team members. So if we knew a physical therapist worked with these 5 kids, I could assign that physical therapist to all 5 students as opposed to individually. We can assign case managers to the students. And then NSSRS reporting is it's a Nebraska state report that we can pull up information on that. So I don't know. I wanted to give you just a little bit on that. So we have a lot of different search features, and this is kind of like the main starting point for all of our users when they go about starting to do their work on a given student. When you start working in with the students, you'll find down here, and I created one with records called Illinois sample here. So if I go to, I find that student, over to the right of the student's name is a options menu that applies to that student. And so from this menu here, I can pretty much accomplish anything I need to do on the site for the student. So I want to take you through those options real briefly, just so you can see them. The first one we have is an edit student screen. So this is essentially our demographics page on SRS. First name, last name, some ELL status, alternate assessment, are they awarded a state, those kinds of questions. And this is just where we keep the demographics on the students. Every record on SRS has a status too. So I wanted to show you that just real briefly. Any student who's currently actively receiving services, in these different schools in special education, their status is going to be active, which just tells our users this is an active student currently receiving services. When that student maybe returns to full-time regular ed or graduates or what have you, we don't need our users to have to keep sorting through student names that they no longer are working with. So we have the ability to make them inactive. And when a student record is inactive, they by default don't show up on our searches when you do a search from that search screen. There are settings that allow you to see active and inactive, so you can still bring them back, but just by default settings, you don't see those records. And then for our state reporting, we have places here we can put in exit, what the exit reason is, and put it right on deceased. Let's say they transferred to another school. That's a little more friendly. They transferred to another school district, and then you put in the date, and then the system will record that information as well. And just a couple other little things, and this is just what we've been trying to do over the last few years, is as we improve the site, we tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. So we've done some things like if the student is not awarded the state, there's no follow-up questions. But for instance, if I said the student is awarded the state and I click it, then there's some follow-up data that we ask you for. So we only ask our users to fill in what's really required, and if they say the student's a non-public school student, then we ask them, well, what non-public school is, they ask. But you don't have to sort through all that stuff if it doesn't apply to you. I'm looking at the clock, and I better keep moving here. So edit student screen. Now we have a parent guardian screen, and I won't mention this too much, but this is a place where we can just see parent contact information. There's a way to edit it. So probably enough said on that. The students team, though, I will spend just a little bit extra time on. So on our students team page, this is how we share access to other people in the district. So I mentioned that kind of the point person is the assigned case manager. That's the case manager who's assigned to this student. Now, if that case manager says, hey, this student needs the services of a physical therapist, what they can do is go to the students team page, and then at the bottom of the screen, they'll see all the personnel who have one level of access at that student school. You'll see district managers, case managers, you'll see all levels of access. But what I would do is if I knew that, Mr. Tibbs here was the speech pathologist for my student, what I can do is come here and click this edit button, and then I'll hit save. and that just locks in that person into the student team and tells them this person has edit access. So the way this will work is that when I do that and I save the button, as soon as this other person with the account logs in, they will have immediate access to the student, and they'll be able to edit any forms that we've created for them. So this is how we can share students, access to students. You can take that access away as easy as you add it. I just uncheck that box, re-hit save, and then they no longer have access. You can turn those things on and off, so you can give people access even just for a brief period of time if they need it, and then take it away. But this way we can ensure that the confidentiality of the student is maintained. I'll keep moving here. Student form screen. This is where we house all of the different forms that we have. SRS has all of the forms that are required by, well, Nebraska's Rule 51 is what governs our special, Rule 51 and 52 governs Nebraska's special ed rules for us. And, you know, I'm sure Illinois has their own version of that. But any form that's required by Nebraska's Rule 51 is available on this form. We have them divided by Part C forms, which is our early intervention, to our Part B forms, which are 3 to 21 years old. And we also have some optional forms which the districts can turn on and off if they want to. Determination notice, functional assessment, and then some data cards. I'll talk about that later when we have time. So once we have the ability to create the forms up here, as students stay on the site, we archive all of their forms. And I've just created a sample one with a few forms, but if you have a student who's been around for 16, 17 years on the site, they're going to have a whole bunch of forms. So we have ways you can just say, just show me IEP only, or by default we show you all forms. So we have those options available there. Then as we get to the bottom of the form screen, you'll see a list of the forms that we've created for the student, and then SRS will archive all the forms that the students had, for as long as they remain in special education in Nebraska. So it gives you a list of the forms in the order that they were created. So whenever we create a form, we record the creation date. So that's what this date is, and then we display them in order of the most currently created form is going to be on top. The oldest forms will be on the bottom. Over this column here is just going to be the main date on that form. If there was a main date on the form, like if we're talking an IEP, it's going to be the date of conference. It's an MBT, it'll be the date of the MBT. So whatever the main date on that form, you'll find that here. And then over here is just gives you an overall idea of the status of the form. On SRS, we have two main statuses of the form. So draft is what you'll see here. Draft form just sounds like what it is. It's a form that's still editable. It's still being crafted. And you can delete these forms. You can make modifications to them. If you're on the student team as with an editability, you'd be able to come in and edit this form as well as the case manager. And then we also have another status of the form, which we call finalized. So once the form is done and it's been approved and it's been looked over by the parents and it's ready to become that official legal document that we're going to follow for a year, we have the ability to make that finalized. And when we do that, it takes away the ability for our users to change it. They can't even delete it, so it kind of gets locked in place. Now we can help people unfinalize it if necessary, but we try to avoid doing that. But basically the finalized form tells us the site's done, and when we're pulling statistics for like our state reporting, what have you, the data that we pull only comes from finalized forms, just to give you a general idea there. And then with each form, we have different options as well. So what I want to do is just briefly take you through the IEP form that we have. The IEP is probably our most, I don't know what I just clicked there, but I'll try this one. Oh, there we go. Okay, it's got to be patient. So our IEP form is probably our most, probably most worked on form, has the most bells and whistles. So once you understand our IEP form, you kind of understand every SRS form. So that's why I'm going to start with this one here. But just some of the basics, some of the content might change, from Nebraska to Illinois. So I'll kind of minimize that. But I did want to show you just some of the information that we present, on an IEP form. Starting from the left here, we have this, we call it the quick links bar, but basically, it's just some information that we thought might be useful to our users when they're creating this form. So for instance here, when I look in this bar, a typical IEP form will have more information in it. These are sample kids that I just kind of created a, super fast IEP for. So we don't have all the information, but the concept is, if I want to know what the primary service was from the student's previous IEP, I can look up that information. I can see it was physical therapy. Now, if I click this button, it's going to open up a new tab on my browser, actually take me to that previous IEP, where I can visualize that information and maybe copy and paste some stuff that I want to preserve. We also have some navigation, like a next button, a save button. Those stay static on the page. So you see as I scroll up and down, the save button is never more than a couple inches away. So we think that helps with usability. One of the issues we have on SRS is that we keep editing the forms to one person at a time. So right now, while I'm on this IEP, anyone else trying to get in it would get a little message saying that this form is locked up by Wade Fruhling, and it'll actually give you a general idea of when I'm probably going to be off of the form. Okay, but we don't allow multiple people to be on the form in an editable sort of way at the same time. So one of the problems that came out of that was that sometimes people would forget to click this done button when they left the form, and this done button up here just tells us that I'm clear of the form, somebody else can get in. So we added this little countdown clock. So if you forget to click that done button, the form doesn't stay open for hours and hours. The worst case scenario would be is it would stay open, as you can see on here, 17 more minutes. And every time I save the page, that clock starts over. Okay, so it's not like we're telling our users, you've got 20 minutes to finish this page or we're kicking you out. It's not like that at all. Every time I hit save, it will restart the form for me. And if the clock does reach 0, it will automatically save everything on the page for me and take me from this editable version of the page to a view-only version of the page, which will look like this. And because sometimes it would get a little confusing, people would go get a cup of coffee and come back and wonder why the text boxes didn't work. We made this big view-only just so it would stand out as your form switched from the editable version to the read-only one. So anyway, we have that countdown clock, and it's actually a built-in little autosave as well. We have different navigation here, so I can start on page 1, skip to page 7, what have you. This next button will take you to the next consecutive page. This one gives you an overall view of where we're at on the form. So it tells me right here that this is a draft form. We're still able to edit it. And then we use different color coding to let you know where we're at on the form. So you'll see this color here. This number 1 is red. And what that tells me is that there's some required data on this form that's required by Nebraska's Rule 51 that we have not yet entered in. Where if I go to page 2 here, and you'll see that's black, that's telling us that every required field has been filled in. And as far as page 2 is concerned, this form is ready to become finalized. Okay. We do have Spellcheck built into each form. Save button, of course. Over to the right here, we have those same student form options that we were talking about here. So if I wanted to go to the form screen, back to the edit student screen to check his birth date or what have you, I don't have to go back to search and then go to another place. I can go directly there. This is something that I think is really cool. And we don't have this on all of our forms yet, but our most popular or most used forms, we do have a built-in translation built in. So by default, we give our users English, but you can choose Spanish from this list. As soon as I choose Spanish from that menu, the page refreshes, and then you can see down here, all the text has been replaced with Spanish text. It does not convert the text that the users put in, however. I would point that out. This being a legal document, we're not convinced that those translation softwares could do it in an accurate way that would, meet legal criteria as well. So, I keep moving. So anyway, that's the basics, and you're going to find a lot of this on every SRS form. Oh, I did forget one too. We also have a report error button. One thing that we do with SRS is that we offer a help desk. Basically, we man from 8 to 5 every day, and we have our users call us in, and this is just one other way to get a hold of us. So if the user's on this page and they're experiencing a problem, they can click that report error button, and it'll give us some information, and they can report the problem in this text box like so. And as soon as they hit submit, this will form an email that gets sent to us at our help desk, and it actually gives us some good information. It tells us the form that they're on, the link to it, who was the user, what their contact information is. So it gives us all this stuff ready to go so we can help solve our users' problems and then get right back to them. Yeah, I better keep moving here. So that's page 1. Just kind of take you through the IP just real briefly. Page 2 is our special considerations page. Things here like student strengths, parental information. I'm sure that there's a Illinois equivalent of that. So, we have those on our second page. Our third page is our present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. Basically, we just have a giant text box that people can put all that contact, not contact info, but that information into the system. On page 4, we have our goals page. The way we do our goals is through different tabs. So each goal is basically its own little mini form. So if I have one goal up here, we have a section for the measurable annual goals, short-term objectives or benchmarks, and then just information here about how progress will be reported. Will progress be coming out 9 weeks, every semester, 6 weeks, what have you? In Nebraska, we typically use 9 weeks. That's going to be like quarterly report cards. Over here, we have a section here where we have to put in the dates when progress will be reported, which, we have to do this for every goal. So if you have 5 goals, that'd be 20 repetitive dates you'd have to put in. So as a little shortcut, we have a little link up here that if I hit restore dates from schedule, this will pull dates from the school profile page, where the student's attending, which will hold all the progress reports dates for when that school, and then everybody in that school building will share those dates. So if I click that, well, of course, you have to set those dates up before, which I have not done. So that is why it's not working. But had I put those dates in for your school profile page, they would have come up, and it just occurred to me now that I should have done that. But hopefully when you guys test this out on your own, on your own pace, I'll have those dates in for you by then. Our next page is our transition page. We have, again, all the information is required by Nebraska's Rule 51 when a student's transitioning out of special education. Section here for post-secondary goals, course of study. And we organize these just into text boxes like so. And then there's also at the bottom a transition activities section where you can put in the activities, the agency responsible, and the due date. Moving on to page 6. This is where we record all of our services. So there's a section here for just an overall statement of the services that the student will receive, and what those services will take place with regular ed students or outside of the classroom. So those sort of things will be listed up on top. Every student on every IP will have to have at least one. We've listed it as primary service, but we choose those through a list of approved services from our Department of Education. Tells us that pretty much everybody will be using these services, so they don't have to type it in. They can just choose it from a menu. We'd say when the services will start, and we have a built-in little autofill for that. So if I put in December 13th, again, I didn't fill out the whole form. So if I had put in the duration dates, it would put that in as well. But those will generally autofill for you as well. So then on our services pages, we have a section here for the primary service, then just any additional services. So you're not limited to one service. You can have as many as the student needs. There'll be a section for supplementary aids and services, program modifications and accommodations. And just real briefly, just on top of the accommodations and modifications section that we have here, we built in a accommodations and modifications checklist that we compiled from various sources all over the state to kind of see what everybody's doing. But basically, it's just a kind of a nice way to select what accommodations and modifications a given student will need in various subjects. So as you go down this accommodations and modifications checklist, we have different categories under like different categories. So for instance, pacing, we have things like maybe the student needs extended time requirements, allow breaks, vary activity often. Then we have categories like lesson presentation, environment, assignments. I mean, on and on. There's a whole variety of them. But the way it works is, let's say in a given situation, maybe we have a student under pacing. Maybe we need to extend the time requirements for that student in subjects of reading and maybe math. So I've already got reading selected. and I could choose math, and then, like I said, if I wanted to add another one, maybe science too. So you could add whatever subjects we want that particular accommodation modification to be applied to. And then when this overall IEP prints out, it's going to give you all of these different categories that we've selected, organized by subject matter. So everything we selected for reading will be under one category of reading, so that you can pass that sheet off to the regular ed reading teacher, and that way that he or she will be able to look down the list and see what we need to do for that particular student. Moving on here, we also have a section for supports for school personnel. That's just part of the form. One of the things on state of Nebraska, where they ask for the percentage of time students spend in special ed and regular ed, so we have a way to record those bits of information. And we also have a section called Medicaid and Public Schools Consent Form, which I'm assuming Illinois would have too, but basically, if up in the services, up on top of the page, we selected occupational therapy, physical therapy, or speech language therapy, those all qualify for Medicaid and public schools. So if you select one of those options, this MIPS, or Medicaid and Public Schools Consent Form, will appear on this form. And it's actually a standalone form that prints also at the end of the IEP that parents can sign and give consent to using their I think it's their insurance for Medicaid or something.
Oh, it just allows the school districts to access some Medicaid funds for those services. So.
Thank you. Then the last required page of our IEP is it's kind of a little of a catch-all page. We have a couple of little sections on student transportation, how students will take state assessments, extended school year services. So we have just kind of some small sections addressed to each of those topics. And then the last page, and this is not a required page, but we do have a supplemental page that if the user had some information that they want to present to the families, but maybe it wasn't specifically called out in one place or another, we have a couple options that you can put additional supplemental information. So one option would be I can hit add row on this text box area section. I can put in a title, maybe maybe the doctor gave us some notes, so I could title that. I could put in whatever that information was down below. Then another option we have is that you can actually upload PDF documents to the form as well. And so I have like a sample upload here. Whoops, wrong one. But I find a PDF. So when I'm clicking this, is just files on my own computer, where I go to where I've stored those PDFs I want to include on SRS. I'll hit open. Then SRS will upload that file into SRS, and then from there I can click on it, or it will also print as part of the overall printout. So that is basically the IEP form as we have it. And I did want to show you a couple other things on one of our finalized forms. Oh, actually, I did want to show you. So I made a kind of a draft one I wanted to show you that's kind of set up nice, look like a blank one, but I wanted to show you what the printout will look like. There we go, finally. Yeah, so basically this is the printed version of the IEP. You can see up here I put a little IlliniCloud logo on there. It tells you the type of the form. So here's our, people who came into the form. Here's where the parent would sign the document. They have to agree to a couple, issues here. Here's our special considerations. And I didn't put any text in. I just made some lines to make it look like a kind of a blank form, give you a better idea. But special considerations, present levels of academic achievement, functional performance section would be right there. All of our goals are printed out on their own separate page. So I only had one goal, but that's the goals. Here's what the transition page would print out like. And then the services, when we talked about the services, it puts it into a nice little matrix for you. So here's our services, supplementary aids and services, supports for school personnel. Then there's that last page, transportation, assessment, extended school year services. And then there's a supplemental page, and I didn't fill it up very much to give you a sense of supplemental pages will print towards the end. Here's that accommodations checklist that we pick. So, the ones I selected reading, you'll see we're all under one category of pacing. Then I'll see a math, science, Title I. So basically, I'm going to hand this to the math teacher. The math teacher will look at their category and go, okay, these are the things I need to do with this particular student. Here's that MIPS, or Medicaid in Public Schools consent form that the parent would, read over and sign, document. Then here's the PDF, and I put a little color on so it would stand out. But these are the PDF upload that I put into the site as well. Just real quick, I wanted 2 more things, and I'll open it up for any kind of questions that we may have or anything like that. We have a couple little options built into the forms as well. Let me get rid of this one. One of the things we try to do as a time saver for our users is a lot of times when you do an IEP, maybe some of the information is going to be same every year. I mean, if the student didn't need Braille instruction this year, they probably won't need it next year. So we figured a lot of the information on IEP can be carried over from one year to the next without having to start from scratch every time. So we built in a couple options to help our users do that. One of them that a lot of our users really enjoy is, we call it dupe. It's short for duplicate, but if I click the dupe button here, what that's going to do is take this IEP that I had created and finalized and give me a brand new one, but you'll see it's filled in a lot of the same percentage participants. If I go to page 2, you'll see that all the text boxes will come in pre-filled, and those are those lines that I put in. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't fill in like the parent information. So if this is the next year's IEP, so we're going to have the parents sign the form again, so we don't have the parents' signatures checked. We're going to ask the parents to check in all those, all the consents and everything that they did before. So redo that. But anything that was put into a text box comes through the way it was before. And then kind of similar to that, but maybe a little bit different, we also have another option, which is like a summarized IEP. So on the district profile page, we have a little set of check boxes that indicate every aspect of our IEP, so down to the individual text box. So what you can do is the district manager can go in and say, when we want to do a summarized IEP, or a condensed version that's made for giving to the regular ed teachers, we don't need to give them the full IEP. We can give them a condensed version, and they can select what aspects of the IEP will appear in the condensed version as opposed to the full version. So if I do that, and we call it the summarized version, but if I click that, it doesn't really create a new form, but it gives me a new printout that takes into account what the options were selected on the district profile page. So I didn't really give you a lot of time to study the first MDT or IEP that I showed you, but this one doesn't have all those participants, and it's only like 5 pages where the other one was 12. So it just gives you a condensed down version. You can include what you want, you can leave out what you want, and it's just more designed to give the teachers a quick view of what's going on in the IEP. Well, I should probably call it quits right there. I do have about more time for questions though, so I didn't know if this would be a good time for one to have a question and answer period.
Yeah, before we get started on the questions, Wade, do they have can you show them quickly where the login is, and then what's their login, and then password? Yeah.
So to access the site, our web address is iep.unl.edu, and I was going to put this into a sheet, and I'll email it to Jim. Jim or Jap? Okay. And I'll email this to you, then you can forward it out to people if you want. But I did set up some sample accounts, and I'll put in the web address.
I hate to interrupt, but we are recording, so this is information that might not need to be in the recorded session.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys can just go ahead and send me the information, and I'll get it to who it needs to go to. This is Jat.
Very good. We'll do that. But I kind of glossed over that. The web address is IEP, like an IEP form, .unl.edu. And it's unl.edu because we have a partnership with University of Nebraska in Lincoln, so it's UNL. But that's what that's all about. And then you hit enter, choose I'm a registered user and like to log on. You can also apply for new accounts this way, but I didn't cut that period out. And then, so
we'll send them the.
Yeah, and I'll send you the account information.
Fantastic.
You want me to just send it to you? Or Jat?
Yeah, you can just send it. You can just send it to me. This is Jat, and I'll get it out to folks.
I'll do that. Yep.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Well, thanks guys for taking us through this. We'll open the floor for questions, but before we do that, I for one am very impressed with what you showed us today, and very grateful for the time that you spent walking us through this. Again, this is very impressive, and the solution is very comprehensive, and makes me kind of wonder how you guys going to make this into a commercial product. It's that great. So let's open the floor for questions. Okay, why don't I start off? I had one question. Does the solution support versioning? So as different people modify the forms and different fields change, do you keep a version history or anything like that? Or
we do indeed, yeah. Actually, we've been kind of struggling over that because we're switching servers around. And we're trying to get some of those older versions to print out just like the new ones do, and that's something Mike's been working on. But we absolutely have different versions, and this site goes back to 2001, I think, a little bit before my time. But yeah, we've had many versions, especially the IEP and MDT. Some are more commonly used forms definitely have a lot of different versions.
But we do have a time frame where everyone's going to be converted to the newest form, right? Newest edition.
I think are you after a version control system or an update? Is that what you're going after?
Well, yeah. I mean, my original question was focused around, when I was looking through the timer and the records being locked and different users updating different things. Is there a version history of a particular form that's kept over time? This was prior to modification, post modification. Here's all the different versions and changes that were made. Is that?
Yeah, I could see. Yeah, just add to Jat, I could see that actually happening in an IEP meeting where there's a change and they we had that back in the last version, and we're just curious about whether that's a good question, Jat.
Yeah. Yes. So we actually that reminds me of another thing that I didn't show you just for time's sake, but we do have a history option on all of our text boxes that if I go into a form and it triggers every time I leave a given text box, what happens is the site saves a copy of that, whatever's in that text box, every time I leave it, and leaves like the last 10 iterations of that text box. So there have been occasions, it's not common, but on occasion, especially our MDT form, which a lot of times we'll see multiple users using the same text box. Sometimes maybe somebody will accidentally type over somebody's previous work or do something to damage it, lose information. We have this history button, which when I use it, it takes, 4 or 5 minutes to actually run because it's something we have to improve a little bit, but it's doing some serious searching. But what it'll do is it'll show you the last 10 iterations of any given text box, and then you can find where the text was, where that information, like from 2 days ago when I knew it was right, I can go find that text, copy and paste it back into the form so I don't lose that information. So that has saved a lot of people a lot of stress over the years, and it's not something people use on a daily basis, but it's a good thing to have
when you need it. Yep.
When you need it for sure.
Hey, I got a question on the population of students in the system. How are you guys doing that now? How do you allow districts to be able to do that?
Like how many students we have, or?
Yeah, so the ones that have IEPs, 504s, and obviously they got to be put in the system. Is it just a manual, every single one of them, or is there a upload, or is there some kind of
Yeah. I totally understand. So there's two ways right now. Well, actually, currently at this moment in time, there's one way to create a student. Well, we have some customized features that we do with our larger districts. It's kind of a customized import-export system where they don't have to enter student data. Our average, like smaller districts currently, and I will tell you there's a better way coming shortly, but there'll be this button on the student tab that says new student. If I click that, I click the old version of it, but basically it just gives you that demographic screen. You can manually fill in the information. You have to type it in yourself and save the record, and then that will create the file. However, having said that, Nebraska is going to this giant data system, which is going to, okay, so you guys know about, okay. So basically we'll be able to allow our users to put in a state ID number it will go to the state's operational data store, pull that information down, and populate parent records, demographics information, all that for you instantly. We don't have that live just yet, but that's built, and we're going to show our user or our advisory board next week, actually, about that.
And David and Scott, is that kind of like your Ed5 project? Is that what it is?
Yes.
That's what I figured. And so you do collect flags from the school districts that have students with IEPs, even though the detailed information isn't there. You have some kind of flag that you collect from the districts? Right. No, it's okay if you don't know. This is a question I was wondering, because that would be obviously, I mean, it's easy for me to think this. All the other people like the Bernies are just, you know, that's not that easy. But I was just curious if that is the local, I mean, the roadmap that you guys are trying to do. So once they put it in there, it's pre-populating with those so that they're ending up, you know, the system is ready to go in and just fill out their information from the different case managers and things. Wasn't sure.
The idea is to integrate it more and more with that Ed5 data store over time. What we're talking about, our step that we're just taking now is on a case, a student by student basis. When a district wants to start services or start a record for a student, they would have that in the student information system first, and then that would publish it to the data store. And we could pull any of that information into SRS then when they want to establish an SRS record for the student. So it's one by one right now.
Good, that answers it. Cool.
Yeah, we got big plans for this connection with the operational data store. We're ultimately going to be able to pull in like state assessment scores and like all sorts of maybe behavior plans and anything like that that's stored on that larger system we can pull into SRS. This big state data project is one of the biggest things that happened to our site in a long, long time. So we're all very excited. Yeah. We're just starting to utilize all that's going to be available to us.
Great. And so you actually have all but 4 districts, and you have some 300 districts in Nebraska that are actively using the system to manage their own local IEPs for their students.
Right, and that's I don't know. I think that's a nice.
Congratulations, that's huge.
Yeah, it's a serious sort of thing. Now, those 4 districts are probably some of our biggest districts, but
yeah, understand.
But
for the little guys, this is really good then for a lot of those little districts that don't have those resources in order to be able to spin up their own special ed things, spend a lot of time on creating their own forms with the separate companies and those kind of things, matching it up to what your state requirements are. You've done that hard work for them, making the tool set right in front of them.
For sure.
Right. And Jim, for the 4 districts that aren't involved in this at the present time, through our strategic planning process and the work that we're doing, connecting it to the advisor, the Ed5, the operational data store, all those different things, and then thinking what this could look like above and beyond what it is now. That's where we're hoping we'd get that interest spurred from those other 4 districts about possibly using this product as well. So it's more all-inclusive.
I know, that's great. That's great. One more question on this. I know you guys have also an identity project where you're trying to be able to, you know, utilize local district authentication and pass it on to various applications. So is that going to have this, or does it already? I wasn't quite sure about how you do that part too.
Scott?
Jim, you were talking about like single sign-on integration with this system?
Yeah, that's always a nice feature. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Mike and the team for development's working on that. Actually, it's not something we're quite ready to roll out, but I would see that coming out in the summer time frame this year.
Okay.
But for now, everything is authenticated with Advisor Dashboard, right?
Well, we have that data interface there, so that linkage is there already. It's the actual authentication into this system, so the users getting this system.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you guys have a lot of changes that are requirements from you guys are the state, but that you guys have to implement in here that the districts would then have to provide additional information? I guess you kind of take that out of the mix because you basically are able to map things or Rule 51 that you're needed directly in there. We tend to seem to have a lot of changes in our data requirements from the state, and we're just wondering about if that happens with you guys very often.
Yeah,
it does happen, and I want to speak to that because we have one of the strengths SRS is that we have an advisory group that meets quarterly. And so our users, which are represented by 5 regions in Nebraska, but we also include some of our larger district representatives. We make sure we know what they want and what they need, but we also include Department of Ed folks in those meetings as well. So we have a direct and ongoing communication about what needs to be in there and what do our users want in there.
Right.
And
part of that,
do you find that most of that is actually just a pass-through communication, what's required by IDEA and other federal requirements?
Yes, there's some of that, and there's some that are just like nice to have things that because of the filing process or the changes at the department, what they have to do. Yeah, hey, it would be nice if you added this, and we talk about it and decide if we want to do that or not.
And that's why I was trying to talk about that crosswalk between what Illinois is required to do, and then I'm sure there's a lot of similarities, but we'll work on that as the next step too.
right. And Jim, within the advisory committee, the advisory board that we have that Stuart was alluding to, June 9th, this past summer, we took them through, well, Jim, Stuart and Wade took them through a strategic planning process again to get us out of that reactionary mode to more of a proactive, what is it we need, but then also how could this look even differently and serve more of a broad-based student population. So I really feel good about the participation and the direction we're getting from our school districts.
And I don't need you guys to do like pricing models and things like that, but you guys do have it's basically a fee for service for districts, and it's based on their size. Is that correct?
Yes. Our school districts, well, first of all, our ESUs pay one lump sum. Doesn't matter how large or how small, everyone pays one lump sum, and it's a small amount. But then we have, what is there, about 5 or 6 different tiers?
Yeah.
We have a tier structure ranging from school districts with 100 students or less all the way up to students that are school districts that have over 4,000 students. So the pricing structure increases with the number of students. But it's very reasonable.
Does that provide the sustainability that you guys need, the development and all those kind of things as well? Does that kind of factor in, or are you supplementing with other kinds of revenue?
No, that right now that's supplementing what we need for development, but we're always looking at other ways where we can enhance that development.
Sure.
With the IlliniCloud, for instance, and what can we do to make the product and sustainability even greater.
Yeah, this is going to be very welcomed by smaller school districts that it's very expensive to get into the market of having an IEP system. Some still are doing things in spreadsheets, so this is great.
Right. So just to give you an idea, the very first tier for districts that have 100 students or less, their total cost for the district is about $150 for the year.
Sorry, I should have needed that.
Okay, that just gives you an idea.
Cost of living in Chicago is much higher. It's like,
I'm bad.
And there's probably a license agreement and privacy statement that comes along with the fee for service that people can feel good about, right?
What was that?
A licensing agreement and privacy statement.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, great. Any last questions? We're coming up on time or a little bit over, but this is great conversation. Any remaining questions or comments?
Thank you very much. You guys have done great work. If we can utilize it, we can figure out a place. We're going to do everything we can to do it, guys. Anything we can do to help our local school districts in Illinois and work together with you guys, this is awesome.
Right. Sounds great. And Jim, maybe after, or Jad, after the holiday break, maybe we can be in touch and see what direction we want to go.
Absolutely.
Sounds great.
All right.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, everybody. Again, very impressed, and thank you for taking the time to walk us through this. This has been great. Very valuable.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.